Well, this next section is very exciting because we're going to hear from three different perspectives. One is from the school perspective with Johnny Fu, who's the Director of Student Services at Lake Washington School District. He's from the UW, so go Huskies. And he is the person who develops and implements well-being practice in the Lake Washington School District. So Johnny, we are so happy to have you. And then we also have a parent perspective, which is Valerie Horvath. And she is a dear friend of mine. She's one of the founding members, actually, she is the founder of Balance in Mind with the Lake Washington School Foundation. And she has a lot to say about the parent perspective, and she teaches us a lot. So thank you, Valerie, for being here. And we have three students because I know everybody wants to hear from our students. We want your perspective. We as adults can try to figure out how to solve problems, but if we don't have your perspective, what good is that? So we want to know what you want from us. How can we help? And I appreciate all of these students so much. We have Avery and Lauren. Thank you so much for joining me. They are working now on starting a mental health club at their school, and they're doing some great work with NAMI Eastside. And then we also have Jaden. So Jaden, thank you also for joining us. And we're going to do a little bit of an interview style where I'm going to be asking some questions, and our our schools and our parents and our students will have a chance to answer what is happening and what they'd like, what they expect, what to be on the lookout for. So, are you guys ready? Of course you are. Great.
No better
Okay.
time than the moment.
Living in the moment. Johnny, we're so happy to have you. You've been doing such amazing work in the Lake Washington School District. So, thank you for everything that you do. I know it's a really big job and there's a lot happening with going back to school. Probably a little bit of chaos. um, no, just a little bit. Okay. I've got a first question for you, Johnny, which is how do you tell if a student is experiencing something serious with their mental health, and what signs do you look for at school? How do we find that out?
Yeah, that's a great question, Barbie. And I just want to say it's so nice to see everyone on this Friday afternoon, and happy Children's Mental Health Month. But going to this question, a place that I go to immediately is what great challenge has it been for this year, especially since we've been online? So when you say at
Yeah.
school now is remote, with some of our students now remote. And so it's been a challenging year to really see how does that actually manifest itself remotely. Because it's easy to hide your camera. It's easy to turn off your camera, as Avery Pye knows, right? It's easy to turn off my camera. It's easy for me to disengage. In the online connection is just much different than in-person connection. Typically, in-person connection, there's an adult in the school that has a relationship with a student that can see changes in behaviors, right? Noticing changes in behaviors is one of the biggest red flags for us. Is, are we seeing something different from a student that is different than their normal behavior? Um, Typically, some signs that we're looking at, and we really want to look at early warning signs, right? Are they not attending school anymore? Are they disengaged in their academics? Are they doing things that is outside their norm? Some of the things that we have seen is an increase in discipline, right? Students acting out a little bit more, or students withdrawing. Other things that we are noticing that are early warning indicators are when students stop turning in homework, as simple
Mhm.
as that. Or noticing that they aren't really necessarily participating in classroom conversation. And so when we think about the seriousness of students' mental health, it really starts early on and being able to I call it neutralizing it early on, and that's the relationship piece. Now, once we kind of go beyond sort of the early warning indicators and we begin to see some dramatic changes in mood, behavior, social emotional behaviors, that's when we need to step in. That's when the adult needs to really sit down and say, okay, what's really going on and how can we intervene? Not everything has to be sort of this uh, all hands on deck. We can actually provide supports within the environment. We can change the environments in different ways that can better support this child's mental health well-being in the school environment. So when we think about changes in behaviors, when we think about some of the mental health challenges that a student can face throughout the year, I really believe that we can actually change the environments or provide interventions. Now, when we reach that serious level piece where we're really noticing, I call it the outburst, the unable to really engage with the student, that's when those are really concerning behaviors. That's when we got to pull in a team. And I always say it takes a village, and Val knows this. It takes a village to really support students and our youth. Um, some of the things that we really look for at schools, and just kind of really a little bit more granular, is students' language and what are peers saying. One of the great things about social media is sometimes we hear about it ahead of time, and students give us a lot of red flags around what's going on with their peers. It gives us opportunity to seize the moment and step in. And so, the way I see it is there's early warning indicators that is really contingent on relationships. There's that sort of intermediate where things can go both ways. And I think as a school system, we can actually intervene. And there's okay, we have some significant concerns, and it's going to take a village to kind of wrap around the student to do something and hopefully change the outcome. That's the key, is how do we change the outcome? We don't want it to be significant in which we're thinking about long-term impacts, right? We want to be able to limit some of the negative impacts that a student might be going through.
Thank you, Johnny. It's great information. I know this has been a challenging environment with a lot of students still online, and we lose that personal connection to be able to see them because we just see their picture or their name on a screen and they're muted. We don't know what's happening in their home. So thank you. That's really great information. I'm going to ask Valerie, because she has a lot of experience with this, doesn't she, Valerie? Of being a parent and knowing some signs to look for in your kids if you're a parent. Would you share some of those signs that you want to look for and what you do about it?
Yes, absolutely. I think the first thing I want to say is, if you're here today, thank you, because that is the first step in looking for signs in your kids, is some awareness. Not all of us grew up with mental health education. This may be a surprise to you kids, but it wasn't spoken about when I grew up. You were sad, you were hyper. I'm thinking those are the two conditions that might be expressed, and neither one of them was a mental health condition. So realize your parents are coming in at a disadvantage and having to learn everything as we go. We're trying, but we don't always get it right, which is why it's going to be great to hear from you guys today on how we as parents can do a better job to match you where you are. But the number one thing I have to say for any parent, and this comes from lived experience as well as experience with balance in mind, is trust your spidey sense. There is no other way to say it. Johnny was so correct. Look for changes, but they're tweens and teens. So there are always changes coming on. If they're in the room all the time, part of that is being a normal teen, unfortunately. But really trust your sense of who your child is, and then use what you might see around as ways to either verify it or maybe ease yourself. But things like, have their friend groups changed massively? That, in my case, was a huge warning sign. And depression doesn't always look like you're sad and you stay in your room. Sometimes it means you do everything you can to escape your house. So just because you may have a certain viewpoint of a particular mental health condition, anxiety looks like this, and eating disorder looks like this, it may or may not present that way in your teen. Trust your sense about how your child is doing, because everyone I've talked to, that was in a situation like mine knew there was something. We couldn't get our kids to tell us, but we knew there was something going on. And yeah, I mean, there are always lots of clues when you look backwards. So just being aware and open to the idea that your child might be experiencing depression, anxiety, and eating disorder. All of those conditions, by the way, are going through the roof during our pandemic. Some of this is normal response, and sometimes when it moves into eating disorders, clinical depression, generalized anxiety, then that's time to get someone else involved, like your pediatrician or a therapist.
Thank you, Valerie. That was really great advice. Trusting our spidey sense. Because
Yep.
I think we have that intuition, like something's off. I need to do something. What do we do? And we really want to hear from our students today because and thank you, Avery and Lauren, for helping me do the youth survey. That was so eye-opening for us. And knowing that most kids are not talking to adults, they're talking to their friends. So it's up to other students and friends to say, I'm noticing something is going on. What signs do you guys do, Jaden, Avery, Lauren? If you want to share some of the things that you look for in your friends that would alert you that something's happening, we have to step in.
Yeah. Some things I would say I'd probably notice most if my friend was struggling is probably just them being withdrawn from like a friend group or a friend, maybe not coming to like social gatherings as much. And most of my friends are very social, so it's like easier to tell when they might be struggling if they're just not showing up, or they might not be communicating outside of when we can see them face to face. Because I know that's kind of a big thing, is to like communicate through social media with friends. So if they might not be doing that, there might be something else wrong, or they're just isolating themselves. Things like that, I would say I would notice.
To add on to that, I would say a lot of times when we can tell that our friends kind of seem more on the downside, or that something's going on, they tend to not care about anything, whether it's, like turning in assignments or letting their grades slip, or, even like what Avery said, just coming to like social events. We see a lot of our friends when, like she said, a lot of our friends are really social. And so when they do come and they're really quiet, or they're not looking like they're enjoying themselves, it's a pretty good indicator that they're not, that something's up.
I can usually tell by the type of words they're using or like how they're acting. They usually like isolate themselves, or they're always in like a negative mood. So they never get that social interaction.
And I know, like, I have a son, and he's a man of few words, so it's hard to get this out of him. Do you find that too, Jaden, that sometimes boys like don't want to express themselves?
Yeah, I notice boys usually always hide their feelings, and girls are usually always are expressing their feelings. So it's always harder to get it out of the boys.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I've got both a boy and a girl, and boys just don't talk about that. Where they'll go play, they'll go do things that are more physical. I know these are total stereotypes, but they, in my family situation, were accurate. Whereas my daughter talked all the time until, she started having mental health challenges.
Yeah.
And to answer David L's question, I would say if I notice a friend was isolating themselves, I would do my best to like go to them and reach out to them and make sure like I can be a friend to them. So maybe taking them out to food, or just reaching out to them over text or call, or asking them to meet up. I think that would be the best way to like solve that issue, or find out where they're coming from, or where their problems are coming from, really.
So you really reach out, you don't just let them be. You say, I'm noticing you, and
Yeah.
gonna give you
And
some
as a
attention.
parent, I think if you know their mom, or dad and have any relationship with them, I would have so appreciated one of Ava's friends coming to me, even if they were wrong, and that weren't the case. But just having one of their friends come to me would have been really helpful and appreciated.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's kind of an uncomfortable thing to do, to be able to talk to another adult, but it can be very comforting for you too to say, I've notified the important people about this. So thank
Or
you
you
guys for
can
your.
use their parent. I mean, you can use your parents. I know that I was the go-between with some of my daughter's friends, and I spoke to their parents. So because that was too much to ask of them, of my daughter. But parents, they connect. We're all looking out for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think, this brings up a good point around the work that we're doing around mental health should be around destigmatizing and normalizing it so that we can openly have this type of conversation without saying, I just feel uncomfortable being able to go to a parent and say, hey, I noticed something different. Have you noticed that? Because sometimes our kids are great at hiding their emotions. I've worked with many young folks, and you guys are great actors and actresses. It's like, I can sense it, but you guys are putting on a great show. And so you guys know each other so well. You guys know all the hidden secrets. And so how do we, a question for me that always comes up is, how do we actually have these types of conversation that normalizes our mental health well-being, right? Because I think sometimes when we think about mental health, we think about that there's something wrong with you instead of saying, this is just a part of a life experience and we all need supports in different ways. And that means that certain times, especially during the spring, sometimes we need a little extra boost in support. And how do we do that so that it doesn't feel isolating, doesn't feel like there's something wrong with us? I think we just need to be able to normalize this in a way that we don't feel like there's inherently something wrong with us, because that's not the case.
Johnny, that's so right on too. I prefer to look at anything with our mental health like a mental health experience. So if I'm having a bad day, I'm having a mental health experience today. It may not be something I can label myself with, but today I'm not feeling great. So here's my experience today. And leaving it at that and moving on. And I'm going to move on to our next question, also for you, Johnny, to start us off. What's a comfortable way, like at school, that you would approach a student when you notice something is off? How do you approach them that's comfortable for everybody?
Some of the work that we're doing that I'm really proud about is really leaning into a relationship. And through a relationship, what we're talking about is how do we connect well with each other? And a lot of this is about empathy. And so we talk about empathy, about being able to take people's perspective, but the empathy piece is how do we actually connect with one another on an emotional level? And there's 5 phrases that I like to use to be able to connect with young folks or anybody. And it's really getting at the limbic system is I notice, I feel, I sense, I hear. Those are some phrases that is able to tap into someone's ability to like, oh, you really see me and you're just not, we get the typical, are you okay? Are you okay? But when you kind of tap into, I notice, I'm sensing, I'm feeling, I'm recognizing, it allows sort of this like, I see you, and there is something that might be more than just you're not okay. And it's okay to not be okay. And I'm right here with you around whatever it is that you're experiencing. And that's the important piece, is that we're trying to teach adults that you don't have to be a trained mental health clinician to be able to identify and have these conversations. It's about just showing up and being human. And through that human connection and relationship, there's a lot of magic there that we could really serve our students. And so really going away from, since I'm not a trained mental health clinician, I don't want to have this conversation, but I know that there's something wrong. I'm going to go see your counselor to let your counselor know. And what we're saying is actually you can do a lot of good as an adult to just connect with the student, be there in the moment with them we've all been there when we've had that day. I don't know about you. I have probably had that day every other day. And I need people to come alongside me. I need my 5-year-old to come and say, Daddy, it'll be okay. My 5-year-old who is showing empathy to me is, Dad, it's okay. I know you're upset right now. I can see that you're upset. And just that connection to say that you see me as a human being is one way that we're really trying to push our school staff and our teachers and our adults that as students return to our campus, our number one priority should be about relationship and connecting with one another. I feel like I didn't answer your second part of your question, Bari.
Well, I don't know. I think you answered more than that. That was that was
I
very
ramble, so
important.
feel free to stop me.
Oh, it's really good. And I think we can just kind of pop that over to Valerie, who might be able to fill in some of the blanks
Yeah.
here. So, how do you approach your child, and at what point do you get the school involved too? What does that look like?
I think the number one piece of advice I would have for any parent is to approach your child with calm and love. Johnny is so spot on by saying that the connection, your relationship with your child is the number one priority. And you've spent however many years you and your child are alive fostering that relationship. And that is the important thing. You know that these conversations are not awkward. And no one would be saying, yep, sign me up to ask my kid about mental health. No adult wants to do that. But sometimes we have to. And I think the first thing we need to do is take a look at ourselves and take a breath. And not the minute you think, oh my God, my child's depressed, the friend called me and says, she's super depressed and things are really bad. Oh my God, I got to go find her and I got to see. Okay, no, take a step back, breathe. And yes, it's urgent, but if you come across and you're, oh my God, are you okay? I mean, immediately, I know you youth are going, oh, get back. And then you start worrying that perhaps you're not as okay as you thought you might have been, even if you aren't super okay. And it goes downhill. So if you can stay calm and try not to fix it and just try to listen. Yeah, don't fix it. I'm a fixer. It's so hard for me. I have to sit on my hands so that I don't offer solutions. And I've got to the point now where I say, okay, are you venting or would you like my input? Because if you offer input as a parent to your child when they do not want it, trust me, that's not going to further the relationship and it's not really going to be helpful. And just trust me on that one because I've done it for all of you multiple times. The other thing that I think is so important is to validate the emotion. And this took me a long time to understand because your kid will say to you, you're so unfair. All my friends get to fill in the blank. And you're like, well, no, I'm fair. Really, look at this other instance where I've been fair. And that, I know you're all smiling. That is not the point. The point is to say, I hear, I understand that you think I'm not fair. Let's talk about it or be curious and get more information from them. Validate the emotion because whatever we are all feeling is always valid. The logic behind it may not be, but the feeling is valid. And so if you can stay calm and try not to fix it, be curious and validate the emotion, you're already on such a good way to speaking with your child about something. I think the other thing I might say is, especially for younger kids, where their vocabulary may not be there to identify this is a mental health condition, or they may not, for two reasons. One, they don't know what it looks like. Oh, in elementary kids, I have a stomach ache every day. That might be anxiety. Those kids, your 8-year-old doesn't know that that might be anxiety. You as a parent might not know. But the other thing is they're the only experience they have with any emotions and how they feel. And they often assume everyone else feels this way. So, so for a variety of reasons, they might not have the vocabulary to express that to you, in which case, if they're younger, you need to really be part of the guiding but letting them have as much control as they can in the situation. Because control, again, is right up there with fixing the problem. You're taking control away from them. And whatever their age, kids need control to build self-confidence.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie. I think that's so true that when we instantly jump to solving and fixing, it's dismissive to them. They're like, you're not really hearing me. I don't maybe need you to fix it. I just want you to hear me. And when we jump over that and try to get into the fixing mode, which is so hard not to do if you're a fixer, anybody else a fixer out there? To just listen and take it in like, okay, I'm not, and tell yourself you're not gonna, like, write it on your hand. You don't have to
Yes.
fix this. You don't have to know what to say. You listen. So, and I'm really excited to hear from our students today about how do you want us to approach you that will help you talk with us? What kind of approach is comfortable for you? Tell us your perspective.
I think both Valerie and Johnny, you guys' points were spot on. The one thing that Valerie said that really spoke to me was that you don't have to fix it. You know, when we are being approached for you know, something that might be going on, first and foremost, I think, at least personally, I want to make sure it's done in like a super private setting. So if it's like, you know, a teacher after school or like pulling you after class, like just making sure that, you know, the door is closed and other students can't just, you know, walk in. I think that's really important because then you have like kind of the undivided attention and you're not worried about maybe somebody hearing you. And then I guess to add on to that, once like the conversation is happening about, you know, mental health, just having someone to listen and validate what you're saying is super important. I know personally, like the best conversations that I've had about, you know, my mental health with, I guess adults that I trust or friends is just when I'm just allowed to, you know, ramble and vent and just kind of tell all my feelings uninterrupted. And I think, I guess my final point would just be, you know, once that conversation is had and the adult kind of knows where, you know, what I feel, not being like, I don't know how to say this, but, like helicopter parents, like if I tell, you know, my parent, I wouldn't want them to be like every single day, like, oh, are you okay? Like, how are you feeling today? Space I think is huge, but still being able to check in is also really important.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I would just 100% agree with what she said, really.
Yeah, I feel like the best thing to do. I feel like the best thing to do is just listen and be there, and then have as much empathy as you can, and then give them as much as like the best advice as you can without trying to solve all of their problems.
I think we hear you loud and clear. As a parent, it's challenging, but I think we hear you. Does everybody hear them loud and clear? Let's not be solving their problems and give them privacy and space. That's absolutely awesome. Thank you guys
And
so
I
much.
think adding on, you know, when kids are kind of showing the signs that they are, you know, going through something, finally like having someone approaching me and like, hey, like I noticed something's up. Are you okay? You know, what can I do? I feel that, you know, you haven't been acting like you usually do. I think that really is important because then you feel that, you know, you are being noticed and that you are important to people and that you're cared about. And I think that's huge, just knowing that you have like a good foundation with somebody with like trust and love and just having someone that cares about you. For
I'd like to add one more thing, which is you're so right. And oftentimes, um, as a parent, the direct approach may not be quite as easy with your particular kid and their personality, but you can always say things like, you know, gosh, the pandemic has really been hard, or this has been a really shitty week. You know, I know that I'm feeling some stress. How about you? How are you doing? And sort of depersonalize it. The last thing that I want to say, which is a really hard thing to say, is if you think your child is depressed, and if they say, yeah, maybe I'm depressed, then one of the points to ask them is, have you thought about killing yourself? And it's a horribly difficult, in fact, I choke up saying it now. And I've had to say it myself personally, to my child and to friends of theirs. And it's really hard, but that is something that is really important. If your child is pinging your spidey sense on every aspect, or they're saying, yeah, I'm having a really hard time, I'm really depressed, you got to ask those questions and practice beforehand, because it's really hard to get them out.
And Val, that's such a hard thing to say. And I know, there's a couple different ways to phrase that too. Like, do you care right now if you live or you die? Do you think you matter? I mean, there's ways to ease into it too, but such an important conversation. So thank you for putting that in there. Okay. You guys, this is such a great conversation. Thank you so much. It's helping me as a parent. I have a lot of work to do. So our next question is, where do students and parents turn? This is for Johnny. Where do students and parents turn for a support structure when they do need guidance? Because that seems to be the very difficult part, is where do I begin? Who do I call? Who do I reach out to? What's available? What do we want to do with that?
Yeah, and that's before I get to that question, something I want to say to just parents around how to have conversations with your child. And depending on your relationship, where I say, if you have an okay or good relationship or a great relationship with your child, one of the strategies that I used to suggest as a clinician is go on a long drive with your child. And whatever it is about driving, because you're not having to look at each other and you're just driving, and where are you going to go? I mean, you're stuck and confined. Those are great places to have open, honest conversations about life, what's going on in life. And it's really a way that, for whatever reason, when we're not having to look at each other in the eyes, it allows us to be a little bit more open. And so I just wanted to make that suggestion. And it's one of the strategies that I frequently tell parents. Going to this question in particular, I just want to put a stat out there. When we look at our mental health system as a state and nationally, Oregon and Washington rank among the lowest out of our 50 states. I believe we're at 46 or 47, and then Oregon's a little bit lower than that. So saying that, it is hard. Where do you turn to? And our schools are predominantly where our parents go to ask for connection and help, right? One of the recent stats is that our school environments actually provide 70% of the behavioral health supports. That's where students go seek and get behavioral health supports that we know has an impact. And so going to your school counselor is definitely probably the first person that comes to mind as a parent. Like, who do I go to? And then the hope is that the school counselor has enough resources or who to contact. There's many different ways in which we can seek help, but I feel like schools is predominantly the sort of the avenue when a parent doesn't know where to go. And it's intimidating. I'll be honest, it's intimidating for a parent and a child to navigate this complex system. I used to, down in Lane County, run a youth voice organization around mental health. And it's so challenging to be an advocate and be able to navigate a complex system around what are my child's needs. And oftentimes the school is the bridger for that. Here in Lake Washington, one of the reasons why I was so excited to come to Lake Washington is there's some intentionality around how do we think about students' mental health well-being. And at the high school level, we've committed to full-time social workers at the comprehensive high school with Evergreen Health. At the middle school level, we have dedicated half-time behavioral health support specialists from YES, who is such a strong partner for us. And then at the elementary school, we're working on what does that look like? And one of the things that is a through line, regardless of what level you're on, is that family engagement. How do we support and navigate with families throughout this process? And so at the elementary level, as we think about building out our mental health supports, family and parent support is a key aspect of that. And this past winter, springish, we partner with it. I'm blanking now.
CMAR?
CMAR, thank you. CMAR, thanks, Val. CMAR to offer parent support groups. And wow, do we have a turnout? And we have our second group coming. That's just an example of why it's so important that when we think about mental health, we just don't think about the individual or think about the student. We have to think about it as sort of a support. What is the network of this particular individual? Do they have the protective factors, particularly with young folks? Is there protective factors, and the key protective factor is what adult relationship do they have? And what types of support do they get from those adults? This is what's so challenging about the pandemic is some students don't necessarily have that protective factor, and school offered that place, but now you're not there. So what does that really mean? And how to actually do it from sort of a virtual world? And so we are building out our mental health system to be integrated, not co-located. And the reason why I say not co-located is it's easy to partner with the agency and say, hey, agency, you have this expertise, come on in and you provide mental health support, meaning that you're going to work one-on-one with students. And that's actually, when we look at the long-term benefits of that, that actually doesn't have a large enough impact. Actually, what we should be doing is thinking about how do we have integrative models that really promote the student well-being globally. You have a clinician in your building. How can you promote student wellness? What are the things that the adult can learn from that clinician and be able to implement into the classroom? What are other small groups that we could do? Not just the one-on-one cases, not just the holy smoke, something's going on, we need your expertise. Absolutely, that happens. But we need to think about more broadly to create a environment where we can actually talk openly and be able to identify. So those are some of the things that we're working towards and some of the things that we have in place because of the strong partnership. And then also Balance in Mind is one of our biggest partners and thinking about how do we promote not only student well-being, but then also the family well-being. And I'm internally grateful for meeting Val and her kick butt team, because every time I get in the room with them, there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of accountability. And I think that's what has made our partnership so strong, is the energy and the accountability.
Yeah, I have to follow on with that, Johnny. Not everyone here will know that Johnny started this, what, 2 years ago or 1 year ago?
It's been a year, oh yeah, almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
I haven't fired yet.
And having him come in, having recognition that we needed someone with experience like his was such an important step for the school district. Johnny brings a lot of empathy, as you can tell, and a lot of experience, and we can see things changing as parents in the district with more supports and more recognition of mental health. That's all, for parents. Kids, hopefully you're seeing that too through your counselors. But I just want to tag on with that and say, parenting is so hard. Doesn't matter what age and stage your kid is, parenting is hard. And if you are dealing yourself with mental health or your child is dealing with mental health, then it gets even harder. And in terms of supports, I think one of the first things that I would advise any parent, and this is coming from personal experience, is look at yourself first. And do you have anxiety? Do you have depression? Have you Are you getting help for that? Are you working with a therapist? If you don't take care of yourself, it's really, really hard to support your child. And that's lived experience too. It's a no-brainer. You know, they always say, put on your oxygen mask first. And I know it and I can recite it, and yet I don't do it. So, so I will tell you, take care of yourself first. And sometimes that means getting a counselor. And sometimes your child doesn't want to see a therapist. Your child is resistant, or for whatever reason, you feel sort of blocked. A therapist is really helpful to work through that. I know I went when my child wouldn't go because I didn't have any idea how to talk with them about this. And so I got to practice. I even wrote cheat sheets that I would memorize before I had conversations with them, because I'm unfortunately that type of person and I can't remember a thing on the moment. So that gave me some calmness as I went in to talk with my child, or bring it up as we were driving, because Johnny's spot on with that, or walking, and have those discussions. But there are other supports. The school counselor, when in doubt, start with them. You can read up depending on, you know, how interested you are. National Institute of Mental Health has great fact sheets, and NAMI has resources about various mental health conditions. There's Parent Chat there, which Balance in Mind offers. It's every other week during the school year, and we bring in experts to talk about mental health conditions and parenting, that intersection of the two, and that helps just alleviate the sense of you're the only one going through it. As a parent, it's so tough. Your child may not want you to talk to anyone. You may, from a trust standpoint, Mom, don't break my trust. Or you can't tell your friends because somehow it's seen as a stigma on yourself or on your child. God forbid that it should get back to, you know, your kids' friends, that you think they're depressed or that they have an eating disorder. Or whatever the condition might be. So it's very lonely, and isolation makes every mental health problem worse. and if you're isolated, again, that just is, that's a recipe for your health as well as your child's health going down. So a therapist is great. Reach out to resources. I know that Lake Washington School District has support groups for parents through the end of the school year, at least, offered by Evergreen, who provides the social workers in the high schools. And also YES offers some support groups and some parent-child workshops, just things that you can do together on substance use, which is unfortunately often part of the mental health experience of kids, to use Bonnie's word. Barbie's word.
Yeah.
I know who you are.
Okay. Thank you, Valerie. You guys are providing great resources. We have a lot of people in the chat who have a lot of questions for our students, because we don't always get to hear this youth voice. And so I'm going to ask you just a random question that we want to have answered, which is, what do you guys see happening about bullying and stigma in school? Has this been something that has changed, or tell us a little bit about what's happening in that area?
Are you asking if like bullying is more prevalent or more like
I guess, how is it happening now? Because I know if we're not so much in person, it's changed a little bit. There's a lot of online stuff going on.
Yeah,
What does
I would
that
say
look like?
it's all online bullying at this point. I guess we haven't been in the building for school in over a year now, and I guess even when we were kind of on the younger side. We were freshmen and sophomores, and bullying wise, in person, I really didn't see any of it. I guess maybe I wasn't my eyes weren't open to it, but online and through social media, it was everywhere, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that it can be anonymous. And we've seen instances, like, for example, we go to Issaquah, and there was this one Instagram account, and it was it just posted, and no one knew who ran the account, and it would just completely belittle the student that they were talking about. And so you see things like that where people can just kind of like hide behind the screen, and you can't get it taken down. And right when it does get taken down, another one pops up in its place. And I would say through COVID and through social media, everyone knows social media is a huge part of, I guess, life for teens. And there's a lot of things like, whether it's like jealousy or just, pure mean people that can leave comments or, talk badly about other people behind their backs. That's where I would see the most bullying.
Yeah, I would say I personally don't really even see like face-to-face bullying happening anymore. Like, I just feel like that was a thing, and of course it probably still does happen, but I personally just like don't see that in my school or anywhere really. I just, as Lauren said, I see a lot of it just online or through like online interactions, and it might not even be still directly targeting a person. It can be through like multiple people, or stuff like that, or one person talking to another person about bully. It's just kind of, yeah, it's very prevalent on social media, I'd say, but not as much in person.
The people that do the bullying really utilize being able to be anonymous. You never know who it is. You can hear rumors about who you think it might be, but you never really know. And with mental health stigma, I would say as COVID this past year, everyone that you talk to probably experienced some sort of mental health, one way or another, whether it's an eating disorder, anxiety about school, or when you're going to go back to school, or when your social life will be back to normal. I would say the stigma, some people don't validate it. That would be, I think, the biggest thing that I personally see is like, oh, they're just maybe being dramatic. That's not really true. You know what I mean? Things like that. And I think that's kind of the direction that we need to all steer away from, is that everyone's feelings are valid, and you really have no idea what people are going through. So just like, I think it's like the bottom line is treat people with kindness. I think everyone kind of needs to remember that in the schools.
Yeah.
Completely agree. You guys took the words out of my mouth.
One other thing I would say is that, like, because I feel like schooling and like sports and clubs and stuff like that is so competitive today, I feel like a lot of people might not talk about their mental health. I think that's like a big issue, is because it might be seen as weak or lazy, which it's not. And I just feel like I see a lot of kids like that's happening. It's just like some competition to like always be fine and get the best grades and be the best on the team and complete the most tasks.
Be perfect.
Like, even if one person is struggling, I know the person that they might be talking to like might not admit that they have also struggled in the past or something like that. So just kind of, that's a big problem I see. It's just like a competition to be okay, like always.
Yeah. And Jaden, maybe you can weigh in on this too, because I'm sure it's even a bigger thing with groups of boys who want to be seen as not weak by having issues. So can you weigh in on that, Jaden?
Yeah, men usually always just like get rid of their weaknesses and don't say they have any, because they're always these strong people that always have to be strong-willed and can't cry and none of that. But yeah, I think men always have to be that strong person, and they always tend to do that, and they never show their emotions.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing we can do is just encourage that.
Hmm.
And sometimes I dare my son to cry. Like, I just dare you. I just want to see if you can, right? Let's
Yeah,
have a
and
little cry.
not even me personally. Like I'm the same way. Like I try to hide my feelings a lot as well, or just not convey them to the people that are obviously they're trying to help me. And I'm not sure how that happened because like I know my mom's super emotional and stuff like that, but like I'm just not sometimes.
Adding on to that, I think a lot of the times when mental health is being talked about and the stigma behind it, if someone like one of your friends opens up to you about something they might be going through, I know like personally this has happened a couple times where, I may be feeling something, but I don't think it's as severe as, what they're going through. And I don't want to like make it seem like what I'm going through is worse. So I don't really talk about it just to make sure that they feel like, I'm hearing them and not trying to compare what they're going through to what I'm going through. And then to answer Valerie's question, what could parents do to support us? I would say honestly with like social media and everything, I know kids nowadays are really like I have a little brother, he's 10 and he's had, he can go on any social media form he really wants to at this point, and there's not too much, I guess, supervision for those young ones that may not know better. But I would just say, like we touched on earlier, just like listening and validating your emotions. Because sometimes you might not get that validation from your peers or I guess adults that sometimes talking to your parents is the easiest thing. And what Johnny said about car rides is completely spot on. I think the best conversations I've ever had in my life have been either in a parking lot or, driving somewhere aimlessly. But
Um, I can also add on to that. For like support, if you're trying to maybe get something out of your child, like to tell them or for them to tell you like what's wrong or if there's something up, I would say, I think Johnny said this, but not to maybe use like broad terms like, oh, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? I feel like those terms are just kind of broad. Like, a child obviously doesn't, if they're hurting, they don't want to like explain every single emotion that they might be feeling or like even one. So I would say try to like ask specific questions like, oh, that maybe you think could have caused this if they're just upset. Maybe like, um, is your teacher treating you this way? Is your friend treating you this way? Like, is there a problem here? Is there a problem at sports? Like, individual, maybe like yes or no questions that you can expand on.
the specifics.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Great. Jaden, you have anything to add to that? Nope. Okay. Woo. I feel like I'm just drinking this in. We so appreciate your voice today. I feel like I need to watch this 10 times because this is such great information as a parent. Um, Back on the other question as well, where do your friends turn when they need support? Where are they turning to?
Um, I would say a lot of our friends would basically turn to other friends, like I see the most, because I feel like it just that relatability and that like the idea that they might be going through a similar thing and maybe have had a similar experience because we're the same age, go to the same school, like we almost have the same life. It's like kind of the best place you can go because I think like being relatable is the most important thing when you're talking about mental health or if somebody needs help, like just telling them that you've maybe also experienced that.
I think adding on to that, which I totally agree with, because I know that personally, like if I was going through something, the first person I'd call is probably her. But as like it progresses, I think deep down, I don't want to have to go to like, I wouldn't want to ask my parents. Like eventually I probably would, like, hey, like I need to talk to you, something's going on. But I think I'd be hoping that they would talk to me first, that they would bring it up to me so I wouldn't have to like, hey, something's really going on. I really want to talk, kind of like avoid that first awkward conversation and you're almost hoping that they see it and that they bring it up to you.
That was very powerful.
Most
Jaden,
of my
anything?
most of my friends turn to their closest peers or a trusted adult because it's most of the time they feel most comfortable with them. And like the ones that need the help, only one or two of my friends have actually gotten help. So it's needed.
And another
Wow.
thing, Avery and I were talking about earlier was, at least at Issaquah, I can't really speak for any other schools, but the counselors for us do a lot of schedule changes or like helping you with what classes you're going to take. And a lot of the time it's not like an emotional standpoint.
Yeah, I feel like they're mostly like advertised, like for students as there to help you with your schedule, like Lauren said, or choose your classes or finish your credits. Like I've never really seen the school like advocate for students that the counselors are there for your emotional help. You know, even though they are, it's just not like advertised throughout the school that that's what their job is, I guess.
At least at Issaquah. Other places it could be completely different. And I'm assuming that if, we were to like call our counselor, email her, be like, hey, like something's going on, they'd be more than happy to talk to us. But I also think, doing it through like Zoom or over the phone isn't nearly as like personal or connected as like in person. That's the other thing.
Anybody else want to add to it? This is great conversation again. Thank you so much. We have a question in the chat, which I think we can address with this next question for everybody, which is about the push for academic achievement. Do you think it's really helping students, or do you think it's causing stress? So, Johnny, we're going to turn to you. What's the focus for at least Lake Washington School District? Where are they turning more towards social emotional learning, or are we going to stick on the academics?
Yeah, and I appreciate this question because I think it goes back to our conversation with our youth just recently, and I'll make it quick because I'm really curious to hear from the youth in this room around this. Is we are going to be offering social emotional opportunities throughout the day, K-12. But in particular, what Jaden said to me that sticks home is we don't teach our young men to actually identify their emotions, to be able to talk about it. And this is just more than the individual level. When we zoom out, this is sort of thinking about our environment and our structures and what society, what we're holding up. And so to that light is saying, as we re-enter school and we think about post-pandemic, what are some of our students' needs? Is how do we help them really understand socially and emotionally where they're at and behaviorally, because that impacts their academic success. The other piece too is when we talk about our community, there is this sense of high pressure. You need to perform, compare yourself, be perfect. This is something I heard from Avery, was be perfect, right? You got to have better grades than other people. And there's this notion where just enough pressure is good. Like think about when you play sports, you're a little nervous, you got a little pressure, that's good. But what happens over time is that's the environment that you live in every day, and you're reminded of where you are standing. What happens is it becomes a pressure cooker, and it actually gets into a place where it causes anxiety, it causes trauma, as we call it, complex trauma, because you've now gone from sort of a little bit of pressure for a short while of time, that cortisol that we all experience, like I do right before I get in front of people. But what happens is when it happens over time and it just doesn't go away, that's when we create that anxiety. That's where we create that depression. That's where we create, and that's our community, that's our family, that's creating that and putting it onto an individual. That's where I say we need to zoom out. We have to think about how do we change our society. It's not about treating the symptom, but really changing the way that our environment looks differently for our young folks and for our own community. What does that really look like? And so this is where I'm curious with the youth in the room is, how do we change that for you guys? What do you want to see from us so that we can change the way that we interact with you, the way that we talk with you, the way that we think about what your needs are and not necessarily what we want to see your life going?
I'll let the students answer that. Avery, Lauren, Jaden?
Sure. I would say just maybe not to expect so much. And I know that's like hard because like everything's already so like established, like schools, what like homework and stuff like that. And I just think obviously it would be so great to have like less of all that, but I know that's probably not going to be changing anytime soon. But it's like for I don't know, simpler things, just like more understanding if we can't get something in on time or just like stuff like that. I feel like it's kind of just more understanding, I would say, or just yeah.
I would say in school and I guess in social, like everybody knows what the expectations are. And I think everybody wants to meet those. And we already put, loads of pressure on ourselves to whether I would say majority of students in high school plan on going to college. And those who do know that how competitive it is now. And with schools going test blind, it really emphasizes more on your grades and what your GPA is and your extracurriculars and your essay. And I think like personally, I'm still turning in an ACT and then Avery is too. And, we know what the stakes are. And I think academic pressure can be good because it holds you to a standard and it doesn't let you, slip. But I think with those expectations, everyone has to be realistic with the student in question. For like a high achiever, a student that's always been like turns in their work, has good grades and stuff like that. I think it's pressure is good, but I don't think overbearing and, making it your whole life, making sure you have good grades and a good test score to submit to schools. And I think for students that maybe struggle more, I think it's really important to let them know that, if you're trying your best, that's good enough. That's all you can ask really. And I think the psychological stress of it really is just, you don't want to be the one left behind. You don't want to be known as like the weakest link or, whatever it may be, lesser than your friends. And I think just from parents, like that point in general, just making sure that like the first thing my parents really ever told me when I was kind of old enough to remember is my first like year in middle school, they told me, everything we do is out of love. Everything we say to you, everything like we push you to do is completely out of love. And, I think about that when I'm a junior in high school and, I'm getting pressured to make sure that my ACT score is really good or, that my grades aren't slipping. And I just have to remember like, it's not because of any other reason than they want the best for me.
Thank you guys so much. And I know we're out of time. I know, Valerie, this is probably your favorite subject.
Oh, my favorite subject. Can I just say a couple of things?
Yes.
One, and they'll be super quick. Your kids are going to be successful whether or not they ace the ACT or take 7 AP classes. I have watched and hired in my life many people who never took an AP class, and persistence and other characteristics were really what caused them to stand out. The other thing I wanted to say is that we focus so much on success in our society, and in an affluent community like we have, highly educated, affluent, that's directly correlated with adverse mental health conditions. So letting our kids know that, you're not going to necessarily need to take every single AP class, take every single athletic opportunity, be the superstar to get into college. There are so many good colleges if that is your child's path. And if it's not, gap years, trade schools, 2-year degrees, right? There's a whole world there. Just think of yourself. I just want to ask you all really quick, how many of you went to high school, a 4-year elite school, then came out with that amazing job offer where you are out earning all of your friends, or moved on to a doctoral program of some sort? Raise your hands. I don't even need to see. Even if you do some of those, you don't do them all bang, bang, bang necessarily. So just remember, they will be successful if they are happy and resilient and have something that they have learned that they enjoy.
Thank you, Valerie. I think those are perfect words that we can end our conference with today. You guys have been a really great audience. I know we have more questions that are still coming in because they just love hearing from all of you. It's so important. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Val. Thank you, Avery, Lauren, Jaden, for being here. And I'm going to turn this now over to Donna, our president of NAMI Eastside, who's going to wrap us up and just tell us what to expect for tomorrow. Make sure you join back tomorrow with the special link for Saturday.
Thank you very much for attending today's conference. This conference was free of charge, and the reason why it's free of charge is because of our generous sponsors. So I wanted to thank our title sponsor, Overlake Medical Center, and our other sponsors who also generously helped us: Kaiser Permanente, Black Mental Wellness, DNA, Catalyst Counseling, TeenWise and MomWise, Sunday Bozeman of Coldwell Banker Bain, St. Thomas School, and Synapse. And we received significant in-kind contributions from Baden Hill Group and Cairo 7. So thank you very much for your support. And David, so far, so good. Otherwise, this would be showing like a home movie. So thank you to Baden Hill Group. We would not be here without the team that we have assembled at NAMI Eastside. So I want to acknowledge our talented staff who often labor behind the scenes and don't get public acknowledgement. So thank you to our amazing executive director, Barbie Collins Young, development and communications coordinator, Helena Ayan, program coordinator, Melissa Schertz, development director and grant writer, Jennifer Curtis, and our bookkeeper and finance person, Melanie Ness. And we survive based on many dedicated volunteers and a very committed working board of directors. And I emphasize working. And so I want to thank our board members, Vice President Paul Gardner, outgoing treasurer Larry Rush, incoming treasurer Bob Krulish, board secretary Margaret Sung-Un Anderson, Ethan Saraka, who you will see tomorrow, Priya Nagar, Virgilia Pruthi, Ann Fitch, and David Combs. And you will also hear from Melissa Schertz tomorrow as well. We had wonderful presentations today, and we appreciate the expertise and the perspectives that all of our presenters gave us. And we also appreciate the closing comment by Valerie that success can be defined in many different ways.
We would like to thank all of our sponsors for making this event possible. That includes our title sponsor, Overlake Medical Center, our benefactor sponsor, Kaiser Permanente, and our advocate sponsors. And that includes DNA, Catalyst Consulting, TeenWise and MomWise, Sunday Bozeman, Black Mental Wellness, the St. Thomas School, Synapse, and the Baden Hill Group.